Meanwhile, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is facing blowback from immigrant rights advocates after declaring those fleeing violence in Cuba or Haiti by sea would not be allowed into the United States. Joining us now, Democratic member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Senator, good morning. It's good to see you. So what should be the position of the United States in terms of what we're watching in the streets of Cuba right now? We've heard from President Biden calling this an authoritarian regime, supporting those protesters. From a policy perspective, what more should America be doing?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't discount what the degree to which what the president says matters in Cuba. It does. When the president speaks out, when Democrats and Republicans speak out in support of these protesters, that matters. That, I think, puts substantial power behind their movement. So rhetoric, words actually do matter here. One of the things I think we can do right now, and I think this is a view shared by Republicans and Democrats in Congress, is that we can make sure that we make sure that information flows are open and available to these protesters. What the Cuban government has tried to do is to shut down the internet, to essentially eliminate the ability for them to communicate with each other and to be able to communicate with the outside world. There are technologies that we can deploy to help with those information constraints. What I don't think is smart is to follow the advice of Republican senators who right now are suggesting that this is just another moment to double down on a policy that has not worked for the last 50 years, continuing an embargo and isolation of both the regime in Cuba and the people of Cuba got us to this point today in which we are hoping and wishing that this protest movement is able to change the tide of a half a century of dictatorial rule. I don't know that doubling down on that policy for the next 50 years is the right solution at this moment. So I'm not really interested in listening to those who aren't offering anything new and are just suggesting that at this moment we should continue to enact a policy that hasn't worked for a long time.
Well, as you know, that's actually the argument right now of the regime in Cuba, that all of the hardship faced by the people, all the economic problems happening in that country are because of the embargo. So do you blame the American embargo for what's happening in Cuba?
No, this is ultimately laid at the feet of the Cuban government, but we should understand how easy it is for the Cuban government to deflect attention from their own misdeeds because of this embargo. Of course, Castro and his allies over the last 5 decades have used the United States and the embargo as a means to distract the Cuban people from the regime's horrible behavior. And so we need to understand how our embargo ends up empowering the regime in many ways instead of empowering the protest movements.
Senator Yamiche Alcindor is at the White House with a question for you. Yamiche?
Good morning, Senator. You put out a statement soon after the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moise saying that the international community should be laser focused on getting elections done in Haiti. I've talked to so many civil rights leaders and human rights leaders in Haiti who say elections simply cannot happen under these insecure times. What do you think needs to happen for elections to actually be secure? And how can they happen if people are too scared to leave their homes?
Yeah, I don't support sending U.S. troops into Haiti, as has been requested by the interim government. I do think that we should be open to looking at some more moderate measures. There may be ways that the United States can help with security improvements in Haiti. There may be non-military security personnel that we can send to help stabilize that country and the capital. But we should only do that in exchange for a promise to move forward with elections. So I think we should be in a dialogue with Haiti right now to offer some degree of security assistance in exchange for a promise to pursue elections. To me, that's not a battalion of U.S. troops, but I think there is a way in which we can support security there, but that should only be done in exchange for that promise that the people ultimately get to decide who rules the country.